Diana asks, looking back from when you started in herbalism, is there something, what is one thing about the plants or healing that you totally were convinced of then that you now disagree with? So what have you changed your mind on when it comes to herbalism?
Wow, that is such a good and big question. Um, I would say more than anything, I would say I've come in a big circle, or maybe it's a spiral because like you come
Sure.
back to the same point, but you've moved forward a little bit. When I started
Hmm.
out, I did not feel like I needed any scientific validation for the plants. I really trusted the traditional wisdom and true traditional wisdom, not somebody saying, oh, this has been used for ADD forever. And I'm like, but the ADD didn't exist forever. So what do you mean we've been using skullcap for ADD for 200 years? Nobody called it that, right? So, but really looking at, when people talked about St. John's wort for dark spirits, meaning, heavy moods, depression, I didn't feel like I needed anything to prove that sort of traditional indigenous ancient wisdom was as equally important evidence as anything else. And then I think herbal medicine went through this point maybe in the late 90s, early 2000s, where there became this sort of influence within herbal medicine that I think happened with a few people and kind of created a zeitgeist where I think we felt that we had to validate what we know with science. We had to know the
Hmm.
pharmacokinetics. We had to know the constituents. We had to know all the things, right? We had to know, was there data for this? Was it proven? And I think for me, if I were to just rely on data and science for herbal medicine, one, that's a very like kind of patriarchal white male Eurocentric way of looking at evidence. That's very disrespectful of traditional and indigenous wisdom, but also it's just often not there. So then we say, okay, well, there's 1,000 years of evidence traditionally of using something, say ashwagandha,
Hmm.
and yet the data of whoever's looking at this plant in whatever context with whatever product and whatever dose is saying, oh, that doesn't work. Now, if I'm going to treat somebody as a physician who's got like a very serious medical condition and I'm using this as my primary therapy, then yes, I do want to know that there's evidence for that, traditional and more contemporary. But in general, like when we're looking at sleep herbs and somebody says, "Oh, I mean, there's no evidence for lemon balm and chamomile." I'm like, "Are you kidding? Like who cares?"
Right.
And
Right.
so for me, I've made a big spiral forward of like, I don't need that. And that is doesn't really change how I felt. It kind of brings me back. I feel like in so many ways, I have made a big return to my roots in that deeper wisdom of knowing. So that's probably the biggest thing I would say. Yeah.
That is such an awesome answer because yeah, I'm thinking back to when you were a kid. I had this way later in life when I experimented with psilocybin too and got into herbs. I never actually did this, but yeah, how does it feel to take these herbs and have these experiences with the plants while I'm say under the influence or whatever? But you did that as a child, and you were also so into science. It was interesting for me to hear that you didn't feel you needed like scientific research to actually know that they were effective, but you already had like these intuitive feelings about the plant.
Yeah.
So it's
I
really
will
cool
just
to
say
hear the
one thing.
spiral. Yeah,
Yeah.
please.
Bro, psychedelics and a cup of golden seal tea. Let me just
Okay.
say, that was the worst. Like if you ever want to taste how bitter golden seal, I could
Oh
not. I could not
wow.
swallow it. It was like, nope, she can't swallow. Like, yeah, it was awful. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I love when science validates something
Sure.
that we already know. I love it. I'm like, I get so geeked out. Like when I was in medical school, okay, here's just like a crazy example. I was in medical training, I was actually in residency, and I was assisting in a cesarean, right? So like that, like let's flash forward, right? Home birth hippie, has 4 kids at home, herbal mama, now at Yale Med School, assisting in a cesarean. And the OB was looking at the mom's uterus and said, oh, she has a boggy uterus, right? Boggy uterus is a term that we use it from the eclectics and we think about blue cohosh, astringing a boggy uterus. I was like, oh, this is really getting interesting here. I'm like, okay. So he asked the OB asked the anesthesiologist to add some Pitocin, which is a plant. It's not a plant. It's a hormone derivative from our pituitary, much like ergonovine, which comes from ergot, which is used as methogen. These astringe the uterus as medications. And so I literally was watching the uterus as this Pitocin went through the IV drip, and I watched the uterus just contract. It just balled up. And I was like, oh man, this is so cool. Like that's what's happening when we use Michela or blue cohosh or any of the things that, yarrow that astringe the uterus. So there were those moments where like I learned something pharmacokinetically or pharmacodynamically. I'm like, oh, that's how that works. I love this. But that's adding to, not proving that. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, I don't really know the science or research behind, say, linden leaf, but I do know when I consume it, it does tend to brighten my mood. And I've had that experience so many times that it doesn't feel like it's just like I could actually feel my mood brightening, and I'm like, there's got to be something to it. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I live for motherwort. It's like the one tincture that's like, yeah, I feel the same. Yeah. And it's funny that you mentioned linden, because linden blossom tea was the first herbal tea I ever drank. Yeah, I was 15. Yeah.
That's delightful.
I was 12.
Flavor.
Sorry, I was 12.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, my best friend, her mom was Swiss and made us linden blossom tea when we were 12 and we had colds and we were at each other's house. And yeah.
That's awesome. It's a fun memory.
Hey everyone, this is Mason with HerbRally. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and also go ahead and subscribe. We come out with new herbal content each and every week. If you didn't know, HerbRally also lists herbalism events. We list herbalism events chronologically. We list them also by state. So you could just go ahead and search by Oregon or Wisconsin or wherever you live. You can find out what herbalism events are happening in your neck of the woods. We also list herbalism events, virtual herbal events. So if you can't make it to an in-person conference or plant walk, we list lots of virtual events as well. To find out more, you could go to herbrally.com/events or herbrally.com/virtual. But if you can help it, I would highly recommend trying to go to an herbalism conference. Those are some of the best learning experiences I've ever had, and that's where you can find different herbal teachers, and then maybe you could perhaps take their apprenticeship. But yeah, just do what you can. Get out there and learn about the herbs, like yarrow, dandelion, corn, all the above, like all the medicinal herbs. And we'll see you out there. Hope to see you at an herb conference. All right, bye.